Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a quick tutorial on how to paint one of the Celestar Ballista crewmen. First colour on today's video is going to be Citadel Wazdakka Red. I'm going to use this to do the quilted area on the tabard at the front. A kind of cloaky tabard bit at the back as well. This just gives it a nice deep red base when we start to add some colours to it in a bit. As always, this is a pretty quick and easy method of painting them all up. They tend to have about 3 layers on each section, so you'll have the base and then 2 highlight layers, and the shade as well as that really, so 4 layers. And that's how we'd be doing the whole thing. Next up is going to be Citadel Kantor blue. This is a nice dark blue that we're going to be doing the edge of the tabard and also the shoulder pads on this particular chap. Now it's been sprayed initially with Retributor armour from Citadel, so you do get the most part of the gold on there. Sometimes when you're painting over it you will find that the colour streaks a little bit. That's nothing to worry about. If it does streak a little bit when you paint it on, just give it another layer and that should be fine. For the inside of the cloak we're going to be using Vallejo White. Any white will do with this, as long as it's just a plain pure white, so you don't want any discolorations or anything like that with it. I'm not too sure what the Citadel equivalent is. It used to be skull white, but that's by the by. As long as you've got a nice white colour to go into there and do the inside of the cloak, that is fine. Again, when you're painting the white on, quite often it streaks, so if it does give a bit of a streak, just go over it, give it another coat and smooth that out. With that finished, we're now going to move on to Citadel Rakarth flesh. We're going to use this on the cloth material that is hanging around his shoulders. It's on the front of the chest here and it's on the back as well, and also on the scroll which is down his back on the right hand side by his hip. Slightly out of focus there, sorry. Again, the same with this colour. If it does streak a little bit when you're putting it on, just give it another coat and that should be fine. Now we're going to be using Vallejo Black. It's a lovely matte black colour this. We're using this for all of the straps, the scabbard on his sword, and also the covers on his gauntlets, the kind of leathery bits at the back there. Now on this layer, if you do find you've missed any areas that you wanted to paint black and you've missed them, we will be going over it a bit later on, because we do most of the other colours first and then we return to the black before we start doing its highlights, so we can colour that in a bit later on if you miss any bits. As always, if you realise and you want to paint it up now, then crack on. Now I'm going to go for a little bit of Cadian flesh tone from Citadel. I'm going to be using this on his arms. Now if you're painting up the other crewman, you probably want to use it on his face as well. There are a number of different skin tones that you can use for these, so whatever colour you're choosing, just use that skin tone. Like so. Now we're going to be using Vallejo Modeler Chrome. Now this is a really nice, well pigmented colour. When you brush paint with it, it covers everything, usually first go. So you just want to be painting up some of the small details with this chrome to break up the gold. Make sure you get all the areas of this. There's a little piece that I miss on this video, and only come back to giving it a coating a bit later on. So the other end to the bit that's being painted now, make sure you get that bit too. And once finished, we'll come on to the next colour. Next colour is going to be Citadel Ahriman blue. I'm just going to use this to do the little stone at the top of his helmet here, it looks like there's a little kind of gyroscope thing with a little jewel inside it, so we're just going to paint that with Ahriman blue. You can get it from the back as well, so make sure you do the rear side of that, like so. Now we're going to go on to the first shade. We're going to use Agrax Earthshade from Citadel. I'm going to use this on all of the gold. Once you start putting this on, it does really bring out the detail. You can start to see a lot more of it on the model. I do really like the Stormcast Eternal models as well. I've said it many times before, but I do really enjoy painting them. There's just something about the armour, and I think the helms on them too, that I really like. Next, a quick layer. We're going to be using Citadel Reichland Flesh Shade, and that's just to do the 2 areas of skin. Like so. Now it's Citadel Seraphim Sepia next. We're just going to use this on all of the Rakarth flesh. So that's the material that goes around his neck and over his shoulders, and also the scroll work on the back. Like so. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Carroburg Crimson. I'm going to be using this on the tabard at the front and on the back. It's a nice dark red, so it does seep into those recesses and really bring out the kind of shape of the quilting. I will be painting up the other crewmen for a blog post on brush and Boltgun, so if you want to see how we've done that one, then you can head over there. Now we're going to be using Citadel Drakenhof Nightshade, and this is just to go over all of the blue areas. If you manage to get a little bit of this onto the red quilting, don't worry too much because you can fix that a little bit later. Now to shade the white, we're going to be using Vallejo Wash Pale Grey. This is kind of similar to, I suppose, the Citadel Contrast. The contrast paint's a little bit darker. I will be having to play about with that in the next few weeks, probably painting up the Primaris Apothecary. But this Vallejo Wash is sound, so I do quite like using it on the white. Now it's going on to Citadel Nuln Oil. I'm going to use this on all of the silver metallics. The good thing about using this over the Vallejo Model Air Chrome is that even though you've painted it on, and it gives it a dullness, you still have the gleam of the metallic underneath it. Like when you use it on lead belcher, it really does dull the shine down, so it doesn't look as metallic as it was, but you still get the shine coming through with the chrome. So we're going to start reapplying some colours now. We're going to start with Wordbearer's Red from Citadel. We're going to start doing each of these little squares or diamond shapes on the front of the quilting on the tabard. This is a very quick layer to do for the tabard. The next couple of layers take a little bit longer, but the effect is worth it. Now we're going to be using Citadel Mephiston Red. We're going to be painting the top half of each of those diamonds with this. You can see there that just lightens it up and makes it look a little bit more like the light is catching the top of them. But if you go around each of the quilted parts on the tabard, just paint the top half of it with Mephiston Red, you'll start to see the effect of it getting a little bit more 3D, even though it is 3D anyway, but a little bit more highlighted to make it look like the light is catching it properly. The final colour that we're going to use on the tabard is Citadel Wazdakka Red, and you're just going to be painting the top two sides to each of the diamond shapes. Now you can see already the effect that's having, just to make it look as though it is catching the light. You're getting a little bit of light reflection on the angles of each of the little diamonds. Overall the effect looks pretty good. Next up we're going to be working on Citadel Kantor Blue. So we're going to reapply this on most of the areas, leaving the Drakenhof Nightshade in all the recesses. That gives those edges of the tabard and the armour recesses a little bit of darkness. And we can start building up the highlights from that. We'll finish this off and come back with the next colour. So next up we're going to be adding a little bit of Vallejo White to the Kantor Blue, and we're just going to be doing a nice highlight on this. Now you want to be highlighting most of the areas where the light's going to be catching it. Imagine the previous layer as kind of like a base colour, that's giving it the normal standard colour of it. You've got the shade in the recesses, and then you've got the highlights on the areas where the light is going to be catching it more. Now I'm going to add a little bit more Vallejo White to the previous mix and give this another highlight. Now this is mainly going to be along the edges and a few little areas where you're going to add a bit more of this highlight too. So for example this little bit at the front of the tabard where it sticks out a bit more, you can add a little bit more than maybe on these flat edges here. The same on the shoulder pads, you're just going to be doing some almost like edging just on some of the corner areas. You probably won't see me do that because the length of these sections of video, but you'll see it on the next one when you get to it. Just have a look at the shoulder pads and how I've done the highlights on that. Now we're going to work on the armour. We're using Citadel Retributor armour first. So you can cover up that little spot of Drakenhof Nightshade that was on there, and just reapply some of the colour to the armour plating. Make sure you leave plenty of the shades in the recesses, just so that the armour is broken up with that, and you can use that for, if it's the underside of armour or anything like that, you can leave the shade on display more. That just gives it the effect of darkness underneath the leg and so on. Now I'm going to highlight that with Citadel Liberator Gold. As always, you want to be thinking about where the light's going to catch the armour plates and highlight them accordingly. So the final highlight that we do on this gold armour will be a mix of Vallejo Chrome and Liberator Gold. Now I've no idea where that little clip of footage has gone, so what I'm going to do is I'll link up the how to paint the Stormcast gold armour video below and just above here, so that you can see how that bit's been done before we move on. Next it's Citadel Rakarth Flesh. I'm going to reapply the colour to the clothwork and to the scroll. Now because this is the general colour again, you want to make sure there's some of the sepia left in the recesses, but you can also fill in quite a lot of the colour on the cloth and the scroll with this. Then when we come back, we'll have the Rakarth flesh finished and move on to the next highlight. So now we've just added a little bit of Vallejo White to the Rakarth flesh. We're just going to highlight the material around his neck and also the scroll work here. I'm trying to highlight only the areas that catch the most light, so where you've got that crease just below it, you're leaving some of the Seraphim Sepia and some of the Rakarth flesh on display there. You're highlighting the bits that would be catching more light. And the same with the cloth as well, so the top edges is mainly where you're going to concentrate on these highlights, while the underside won't be getting too much. We'll do one final highlight on the cloth and the scroll, so we're going to add some more Vallejo White to the previous mix. We're just going to do some extreme highlights on the cloth and also on the scroll, just to really bring them out a little bit. Now we're going to be working on Vallejo White. I'm going to reapply that, do his shoulder pad and the symbol on that, which I'm presuming is some sort of Stormcast artillery symbol. This is the method that I paint them on. So you've got like a little cross with the holes in the middle of each section. I'm just going to paint a curved line between the corners on each side and the top and the bottom, like so. And once you're happy with the shape, just fill that in a little bit more. And if you need to alter it or you need to touch it up, you can just use a little bit of the blue that we've used previously and just smooth off the edges or cut off the ends or make that shape a little bit better, and then just do a nice little circle of blue in the middle. Now with the cloak, we're just going to reapply the white and leave some of that grey in the recesses. Now we're using Citadel Flesh Tone again. I'm going to reapply that on the arms, making sure you're leaving some of the Rakarth flesh shade visible in the recesses. Again, it's another very quick layer to do this one, as there are only two very small sections of arm, so you don't have to spend too long on these. Next up, we're going to add a little bit of Vallejo White to the Flesh Tone, and we're just going to highlight these sections of arm that are on display. So you're going to be highlighting mainly the top edges. You're highlighting the bottom edge on the bicep there, because the top edge would be shaded from the shoulder pad. Same here. But highlighting the top edges everywhere else. Like so. Now we're going to add a little bit more white to the previous mix. I'm just going to give that one final highlight. You can see there that I haven't actually put the previous two layers on, so I'm just using the previous two colours just to fill in that bicep. And back onto the highlight now. As I say, this is an extreme highlight, so you're not going to be putting too much of it on, just enough to really lighten up the flesh. Moving on to Vallejo Black now. I'm just going to reapply the black to all the straps and all the areas where we may have gone over the black with a different colour. Now you might notice on the inside of his cape there's a little decoration which is gold. So all I've done is I've used the same method of painting gold that we've used on the rest of his armour. I've used that on that little decoration. Now to highlight these areas, we're going to use Vallejo German Grey, a nice dark grey colour. That highlights the black without overpowering it and making it look too grey. Which is one thing that I really don't like about too much highlighting on things that are meant to be black in colour. They do tend to wash it out and make it look a little bit too grey. So I find the German Grey gives it a nice kind of dark highlight. Like, you can blend that in a little bit more if you want to, but I tend to just paint it as is. With those highlights done, I'm going to use some Citadel Mechanicus Standard Grey and just give very fine edge highlights to the black areas. By doing these really fine edge highlights, it does just bring out the shape and some of the smaller details on the black areas and the straps and that. Just being really careful when you're painting on. Now going back to Vallejo Model Air Chrome, we're just going to do these little kind of rods on the parts of the gyroscope around the little gemstone. Now, as often happens, you might notice that I've gone over the lines a little bit at the bottom there and on one side at the front. Bit of a handshake and you get the paint everywhere, but you can just touch that up once you've finished everything else. Now I'm going to reapply some Ahriman blue to the gemstone in the middle there, and also to the lens on the sight, which is on the side of this. So next up, we're going to add a little bit of white to the Ahriman blue. We're just going to highlight the bottom left-hand half in a kind of diagonal across the lens and across the gemstone. So I'm going to do like a half crescent over the bottom left-hand side of the circles. Now we're going to use a little bit of Vallejo White mixed in with the previous mix to lighten it up once more. And we're going to just paint half the area you've just painted with this lighter shade. So that's going to be about a quarter of the lens or a quarter of the gem area. Then again, we're going to add a little bit more white to the previous mix. We're just going to do a tiny sliver of this highlight on the bottom left hand edge. Like so. And finally, we're just going to use a little bit of pure white. We're going to put the tiniest of little lines on the bottom left hand corner, or the bottom left hand edge I should say, and then a tiny little spot of white on the top right side, just to give it a bit of a reflection. And there we have the finished Celestar Ballista crewman. Now we'll be putting the other crewman on the blog, so I'll link that up below once that goes live. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media, link below. Thanks very much.